Hello everyone and welcome to the last favorite books review of the year. As I said in the previous book review, this is shaping up to be about a 3-year-long project, and in fact the next book on the list after this one is kind of a long and complicated and Russian one, so you might not be seeing me in front of this background for a little while. But I do have favorite book review number 25 here for you now, and so let's review To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird is the story of Scout Finch. Her real name is Jean Louise, but her nickname is Scout, and that's what pretty much everyone calls her. Scout Finch is a little girl, age 6 at the beginning of the story, age 9 at the end. She lives in a tiny little town in Alabama during the Great Depression. She lives with her older brother, Jeremy, everyone calls him Jem, and her father, Atticus, who is a lawyer. There are several different storylines, but there are two main ones that are important to this book. One of the storylines is probably the one that everyone pretty much thinks of when they think of To Kill a Mockingbird, the trial where Atticus is defending Tom Robinson, a black man who ostensibly raped a white girl. And of course, this being the Great Depression, Tom Robinson basically has no chance of victory in this trial. And Atticus's name is Mud for defending him, even though that's his job as a defense attorney. But even though that's the storyline that everybody thinks of, it's not the only storyline, and I don't even really think it's the main storyline. It's just one of the subplots that fits into the larger story. The other major subplot in this story is the story of Boo Radley. Boo Radley is the town recluse, and being a recluse in a tiny little town like Maycomb in Alabama is a no-no. It's a social blunder of the biggest kind. But he stays in his house, he never ventures outdoors, and of course all sorts of stories float around about him. And Scout and Jem, along with their friend Dill, being children, spend a couple of summers trying to get him to come out of his house just because they're kids and they're curious and they want to see this scary, scary town recluse. This book could very, very easily be about the whole Tom Robinson trial, about how we treat our fellow man, about black and white and race and all of those different things. But when it comes right down to it, that's a little bit too specific for the main point of this book. The thing that really makes this story, the thing that really is the genius of this story, is its narration. There are two Scout Finches. There is the Scout Finch who is in the story, who is a child, and there's the Scout Finch who is telling the story, who is probably an adult. When I read this story, I hear two different Scout Finches. The first is kind of like a grandmother telling her grandchildren all these stories from her childhood. It very much has that simple southern storytelling reminiscent feeling to it. But the second Scout Finch I see is Scout Finch the lawyer. Of course her father is a lawyer, and so it makes sense that Scout Finch maybe eventually became a lawyer as well. And so I see a lawyer giving testimony, giving a final argument in a courtroom somewhere. Which means there's a lot of technical stuff mixed in and a lot of dry wit mixed in with the reminiscent narration. Which of course, seeming to come from a 6 or 9-year-old girl who is actually existing in the story, is hilarious. The simplicity of the storytelling in this book ensures that the main point of the novel is not shoved down our throats. When you strip this story down to its basic components, it's the story about how Scout's brother broke his arm. That's stated right there in the first sentence of the novel. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. That's what this story is about. And then the book goes to tell us the series of events that led to Jem breaking his arm, which he does at the end of the book. As I said, it's the narration that really makes this story, both for the simplicity of the narration and also for the choice of the narrator. This is not Scout Finch's story. The events in this book, by and large, aren't happening to Scout Finch. They're happening to Jem, or they're happening to Boo Radley, or they're happening to Tom Robinson, or they're happening to Atticus. Scout is merely the observer for all of these things that are happening to everybody. So the question must be asked, why Scout? Why is this little 6 or 9-year-old girl being the one to tell us this story? Well, a couple reasons. The first is that Scout, as a little girl, is able to see and hear things that others can't. She can listen in on conversations without being detected, she can sneak around and watch things and be an observer without anybody really noticing her because she's a little girl. And any parts that she as a child cannot understand are then filled in by her adult narrator, because there are times in the book where she says, I didn't understand this then, but I do now and I'm going to tell you about it. Not in so many words, but Scout also has a little bit more of an objective viewpoint. Atticus and Jem and a lot of the other characters in the book are going through major emotional changes. But Scout really isn't, because Scout doesn't always fully comprehend what's going on. All she can see is what's right in front of her and the pain that Atticus and Jem are going through. And so her viewpoint from a child's perspective is a little bit more objective than it otherwise might be. But that's not to say that Scout doesn't have her own growth throughout the story. In fact, it's her growth that really brings the point home in this story. At the beginning of the book, Scout sees things in very much a way a child would, very black and white. People are either good or they're bad, they're smart or they're stupid, they're black or they're white, and there's really not much nuance, not much in between. But as we watch Scout grow over the 3 years that this novel takes place, we start to see her emerge as more of an enlightened person. Both from what she's observing and also from talking to Atticus, from talking to Jem, and from talking and interacting with all of these characters, she is starting to grow and change, and suddenly things aren't quite as clear-cut as they were when she was younger. In a lot of ways, this book is very similar to Paper Towns, mainly in its message, which is basically that we should not just make assumptions on people and that we should try to see things from their point of view. And she is able to learn this lesson most effectively because she is the observer of everything that is happening. Because she is the observer of the pain that everyone is going through, she has to, throughout the story, put herself in the shoes of all of these different characters that she is observing. And in the end, she finally learns how to do that. And so this story is most effective because it is told from her point of view, not from anybody else's in the story. If it was told from anyone else's point of view, it would not be nearly as effective and would not get that point across. This book is still very much a favorite. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. If you haven't read it, then please do. And the next book, the long, complicated, and Russian book on the list is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Everybody have a happy and prosperous new year, and I will see you in 2010. Bye-bye.